Have you ever wondered why many gardeners spend so much time taking care of their gardens? Yet the harvest often turns out smaller than they expected. Have you ever asked yourself why we are always taught to plant vegetables in neat, straight rows? Why tomatoes usually grow in one bed while carrots grow somewhere else? And why lettuce is often planted in its own separate corner of the garden? Gardens arranged in this way usually look very tidy and organized. However, many gardeners quickly realize that maintaining this kind of garden requires a great deal of effort. Plants need regular watering. The soil often needs additional fertilizer to keep crops growing well. And pests can become a constant problem because when insects find a row of the same crop, they often spread quickly from plant to plant. After some time, many people begin asking an important question. Is there a simpler way to grow food? A way where plants can thrive without constant intervention? Observing nature provides an interesting clue. In a natural forest, you almost never see trees growing in perfect straight lines. You rarely see large areas of bare soil between plants. Instead, you see many layers of vegetation sharing the same space. Tall trees reach upward to capture sunlight. Smaller plants grow beneath the canopy of larger ones. Roots stretch into different depths of the soil to collect water and nutrients. Leaves capture sunlight at different heights above the ground. Within this environment, every plant has a role. Some plants enrich the soil and improve fertility. Some plants protect the soil surface and help retain moisture. Others attract beneficial insects that contribute to the balance of the ecosystem. All of these elements together create a living community where plants coexist and support each other. Generations of farmers in Korea carefully observed these natural patterns and began applying them to vegetable gardens. Instead of trying to manage each crop separately, they designed gardens that function more like miniature ecosystems. In these gardens, plants are selected not only for what they produce, but also for the roles they play. Some plants add nutrients to the soil. Some plants spread across the surface and protect the soil from drying out. Taller plants provide natural structures that climbing crops can use for support. Other plants release strong natural aromas that help make it more difficult for pests to locate the main crops. When these elements work together, the garden begins to behave less like a collection of separate plants and more like a balanced ecosystem. Modern agricultural science refers to this approach as intercropping or polyculture. Researchers evaluate the efficiency of such systems using a concept known as the equivalent ratio. When the ratio is greater than 1, it means the same area of land can produce more food, compared with growing each crop separately. Numerous agricultural studies have shown that intercropping systems can increase total production by 20 to 60%, while also improving soil health and reducing pest pressure. One of the most well-known examples of this principle existed long before scientists began studying it in detail. Indigenous farmers in North America developed a planting system often called the Three Sisters. This system combines 3 crops growing together in the same space. Corn grows tall and acts as a natural structure for beans to climb. Beans enrich the soil by fixing nitrogen through beneficial bacteria in their roots. Squash spreads across the ground, creating a living cover that helps retain soil moisture and reduce weeds. 3 different plants working together as a cooperative system. Applying similar principles to vegetable gardens has led many Korean farmers to create gardens that function more like plant communities rather than separate rows of crops. In such gardens, each plant contributes to the balance of the environment. Over time, the soil becomes richer, plants grow stronger and healthier, and the gardener often finds that the garden requires less constant effort. These natural principles reveal a different way of thinking about growing food. A garden can be designed so that plants support each other and share resources instead of competing for them. Looking at a garden through the lens of an ecosystem raises an important question. Why is the most common way of growing vegetables based on separating plants from one another? Why are tomatoes placed in one bed while carrots grow in another? Why does each crop receive its own section as if the plants have nothing to do with each other. This approach is often known as monoculture. In a monoculture system, a single crop occupies one area of soil. At first, this method appears simple and organized. Rows look tidy, and management may seem easier in the short term. But when we observe the system more closely, several problems begin to appear. When one garden bed contains only a single crop, all the plants in that bed require the same nutrients at the same time. Tomatoes, for example, often require significant amounts of nitrogen and potassium to grow well. When many tomato plants are placed close together, they draw nutrients from the same layer of soil. Over time, the soil becomes depleted more quickly. Another challenge appears when insects enter the system. Many insects locate plants not by sight, but by chemical signals and scent. When an entire garden bed produces the same scent, it becomes much easier for pests to identify their target. Once insects arrive, they can quickly move from plant to plant because every plant in the row is the same species. Monoculture also tends to use space inefficiently. Different plants have very different structures. Some plants develop shallow roots near the soil surface. Others send roots deep underground. Some plants grow tall and capture sunlight high above the ground, while others remain low and spread across the soil. When all plants in a bed share the same structure, large portions of space both above and below the soil remain unused. For these reasons, many traditional farming systems began experimenting with growing multiple crops together in the same space. Modern agricultural science measures the efficiency of such systems using a concept called land equivalent ratio. This measurement compares the productivity of intercropping systems with monoculture systems grown on the same amount of land. When the ratio equals 1, it means both systems produce the same total yield. But many studies have shown that intercropping systems often produce a ratio greater than 1. In practical terms, this means the same area of land can generate more food when different crops grow together rather than separately. Agricultural research has demonstrated that well-designed intercropping systems can increase total yield by 20 to 60%. This happens because each crop uses resources in slightly different ways. Some plants capture sunlight at higher levels, while others thrive in partial shade. Some plants draw water from deeper layers of soil, while others use moisture closer to the surface. When these characteristics are combined carefully, the garden begins to function more like a balanced ecosystem. A famous historical example illustrates this principle clearly. Indigenous farmers in North America developed a system often called the Three Sisters. In this system, 3 crops grow together in the same space. Corn grows tall and acts as a natural support for climbing beans. Beans enrich the soil by fixing nitrogen through beneficial bacteria living in their roots. Squash spreads across the soil surface, creating a living cover that protects moisture and reduces weeds. These 3 plants do not compete with one another. Instead, they cooperate to form a stable growing system. Similar ideas have influenced many vegetable farmers in Korea. Instead of separating crops into isolated beds, they design gardens where each plant contributes to the overall balance of the system. Some plants improve soil fertility. Some protect the soil surface. Some attract beneficial insects. Others help reduce the ability of pests to locate important crops. When these elements are arranged thoughtfully, the garden stops behaving like a collection of isolated plants. It becomes a plant community where each species contributes to the health of the entire system. Understanding this shift in perspective opens the door to a different style of gardening, a style based on observing natural relationships and allowing plants to work together rather than forcing them to compete. When a garden is viewed as a community of plants, an important idea begins to emerge. Plants are not simply individual organisms growing next to each other in the same space. They can form relationships that allow the entire garden to function more efficiently. Through generations of observation and experimentation, farmers discovered that certain relationships between plants can significantly influence how a garden develops. These relationships are not based on guesswork. They are grounded in real biological processes that occur within the soil and the surrounding environment. One of the most important relationships involves the sharing of nutrients, especially nitrogen. Certain plants belonging to the legume family have a remarkable ability. Within their roots live beneficial bacteria. These bacteria are capable of converting nitrogen from the air into a form that plants can absorb. This process is known as biological nitrogen fixation. As legumes grow, some of the nitrogen becomes available in the surrounding soil. This means nearby plants can gain access to additional nutrients without the need for extra fertilizer. Because of this relationship, many gardeners choose to plant beans or peas close to crops that require large amounts of nutrients, such as tomatoes, peppers, or squash. Instead of competing for resources, these plants support one another. Another important relationship involves the way plants influence pest activity within a garden. Many insects locate plants by detecting chemical signals and scents released by leaves. When a garden contains only one crop, the scent of that plant becomes very clear in the surrounding air. This makes it easier for pests to locate their preferred food source. When many different plant species grow together, their scents begin to mix in the air. Some plants release strong aromas such as garlic or onions that can make it more difficult for pests to identify their target plants. This effect is often described as scent confusion. By blending multiple plant aromas, the garden becomes less predictable for insects searching for a specific crop. A third relationship appears when plants with different structures grow together. Some plants grow tall with strong stems. Others prefer to climb or attach themselves to nearby structures. When these types of plants grow close to each other, the taller plants can act as natural supports for climbing plants. A well-known example of this relationship involves corn and climbing beans. Corn grows tall and provides a sturdy structure for beans to climb. At the same time, beans enrich the soil by adding nitrogen around the corn roots. Each plant contributes to the success of the other. The fourth relationship focuses on protecting the surface of the soil. In many traditional gardens, the soil between plants is left uncovered. Bare soil tends to dry out quickly, and it often encourages weeds to grow. In polyculture systems, gardeners frequently include plants that spread across the soil surface. These low-growing plants create a natural living cover over the ground. The cover helps reduce moisture loss and protects the soil from direct sunlight. When sunlight cannot reach the soil surface as easily, many weed seeds struggle to germinate. At the same time, the soil retains moisture for longer periods after watering or rainfall. When these four relationships are combined thoughtfully, the garden begins to behave like a balanced ecological system. Plants support one another rather than competing for the same resources. Soil fertility improves gradually over time, and the gardener often finds that less constant intervention is required. Understanding these relationships changes the way a garden is viewed. Instead of focusing on each plant individually, the gardener begins to think about how plants can cooperate and contribute to the health of the entire system. Understanding the natural relationships between plants is only the first step. The next step is learning how to apply those ideas when designing a real garden bed. A productive polyculture garden does not begin by randomly planting many crops together. It usually begins with choosing one main crop. The main crop is the plant that the gardener hopes to harvest the most. These plants are often larger crops that require significant nutrients and space to grow. Common examples include tomatoes, peppers, squash, or corn. These plants often serve as the structural center of the garden bed. Once the main crop is chosen, gardeners begin asking several important questions that guide the design of the surrounding plants. The first question focuses on nutrients. Does the main crop require a large amount of nitrogen? If the answer is yes, planting legumes nearby can help improve soil fertility. Crops such as beans or peas have the ability to add nitrogen to the soil through beneficial bacteria living in their roots. The second question focuses on pests. Does the main crop tend to attract certain insects? If so, including strongly scented plants nearby can help reduce the chances of pests locating the main crop. Plants such as garlic onions and certain herbs release natural aromas that can interfere with insect signals. The third question concerns the soil surface. When the main crop grows, does it leave bare soil around its base? Bare soil can lose moisture quickly under sunlight and often encourages weed growth. In this situation, low-growing ground cover plants can help protect the soil surface and preserve moisture. The fourth question focuses on plant structure. Can the main crop support climbing plants? If the central plant grows tall and develops strong stems, it can function as a natural support for crops that prefer to climb. Answering these questions allows gardeners to imagine how different plants can share the same garden bed without competing heavily for resources. One widely used approach for arranging these plants is sometimes described as the ring method. In this design, plants are arranged in layers based on their height and function. The tallest plant usually occupies the center of the bed. This may be a tomato plant or a corn stalk. These plants capture sunlight directly and provide structure within the garden. Around the central crop medium height, plants are placed in the next layer. These plants may include bush beans, peppers, or other upright vegetables that do not grow as tall as the central crop. The outer edge of the bed is often filled with plants that grow low to the ground and spread across the soil surface. These plants function as living mulch that protects the soil from sunlight and helps maintain moisture. A simple example can help illustrate this arrangement. In a small garden bed, a tomato plant may grow in the center. Around the tomato plant, bush beans or peppers may form a second layer. At the edges of the bed, spreading plants such as squash or other ground-covering vegetables may grow along the soil surface. In this arrangement, each plant occupies space differently. Roots explore different layers of soil. Leaves capture sunlight at different heights, and the soil surface remains protected beneath living plants. As a result, the same area of land can support several crops without creating intense competition between them. Designing garden beds in this way helps make better use of both the soil below and the airspace above the ground. It also creates a more stable environment for beneficial organisms living within the soil. When these elements work together, the garden gradually becomes more balanced. Plants grow healthier, and soil fertility improves over time. When a garden is designed using polyculture principles, plants begin supporting each other more effectively. However, for this system to remain productive over long periods of time, the way crops are planted and the way soil is managed are equally important. Many farmers have learned that healthy soil is the foundation of a sustainable and productive garden. One important technique that helps maintain balance in such a system is planting crops in stages rather than planting everything at the same time. Different plants grow at different speeds. Some crops germinate and mature very quickly, while others require a longer period of growth. If all crops are planted on the same day, the faster-growing plants may dominate the available sunlight and space. This can create unnecessary competition and make it difficult for slower-growing crops to establish themselves. For this reason, many gardeners use a staged planting approach. Taller or central crops are usually planted first, so they have time to develop strong roots and stems. Once these plants become established, additional crops are planted around them. For example, in a system that combines corn beans and squash, the corn is usually planted first. After the corn has grown tall enough, beans are planted nearby so they can climb the corn stalks. Finally, squash is planted along the outer edges of the bed, where it can spread across the soil surface. This sequence allows each crop to grow at the appropriate time without overwhelming the others. Another important technique that supports soil health is often described as cut and drop. In many traditional gardens, plants are removed from the soil after harvest and taken away to compost piles. While composting is beneficial, this process also removes some nutrients from the garden bed itself. In polyculture, Many gardeners follow a simpler approach. When plants complete their growth cycle or require pruning, the stems and leaves are cut and placed directly on the soil surface within the same bed. Over time, this plant material decomposes and returns nutrients to the soil. Soil organisms such as bacteria, fungi, and small insects break down organic matter and transform it into nutrients that plants can use again. Healthy soil contains an astonishing amount of life. A single teaspoon of fertile soil may contain billions of microorganisms. These organisms play a critical role in recycling nutrients and maintaining soil structure. When plant material remains within the garden bed, these organisms have a steady supply of organic matter to process. As a result, the soil gradually becomes richer and more capable of holding water and nutrients. Another helpful principle for maintaining productivity is succession planting. Instead of leaving soil empty after a harvest, gardeners introduce new crops into the same space. For instance, a garden bed may begin with fast-growing vegetables, such as radishes or lettuce. Once these crops are harvested, longer season crops, such as beans, peppers, or cabbage, can be planted in the same area. This continuous cycle keeps the soil covered with living plants and allows each crop to contribute to the health of the soil for the next one. When these techniques are combined with polyculture design, the garden begins to follow a natural rhythm. The soil is not exhausted after each growing season, but gradually becomes more fertile. Plants grow in a more stable environment, and gardeners are able to harvest multiple crops from the same space throughout the growing season. These principles reveal that gardening is not only about growing plants, it is also about caring for the living ecosystem within the soil. When ecological principles are applied to gardening, many people discover that these ideas are not limited to large gardens or farms. Even small spaces can benefit from the same concepts. A balcony container or a single garden pot can become part of a small but effective ecosystem. Many gardeners assume that a container can only support one plant. A tomato grows in one pot. A pepper grows in another. Herbs are often planted separately in small containers. This method is simple and easy to manage, but it does not always make the best use of the available space. When a container is viewed as a miniature ecosystem, the design possibilities change. Instead of growing a single crop, several plants can share the same container while supporting each other. Imagine a large container placed on a balcony or in a small corner of a yard. At the center of the container, a main crop can be planted, such as a tomato or pepper plant. This central plant grows taller than the others and eventually develops a canopy of leaves. Around the base of the main plant, additional crops can be introduced. Strongly scented plants such as garlic or green onions are often chosen for this layer. These plants help use the available soil space while also producing natural aromas that can make it more difficult for pests to locate the main crop. At the outer edge of the container, smaller plants can be added to cover the soil surface. Flowers, such as marigolds, are commonly used because they attract beneficial insects. These insects play an important role in maintaining ecological balance within the small container system. When these three layers grow together, the container becomes more than a simple pot with one plant. It becomes a small plant community where each species contributes to the health of the whole system. The central plant captures sunlight and grows vertically. The aromatic plants create natural protection against pests. The lower growing plants cover the soil and help maintain moisture. This arrangement also allows the container to use vertical space more efficiently. Instead of having a single layer of vegetation, the container supports several layers similar to what happens in a natural ecosystem. Different root systems can also contribute to the health of the soil within the container. Some roots remain close to the surface while others grow deeper into the soil. This diversity helps plants access nutrients more effectively. Another benefit of this method is that the soil within the container tends to remain biologically active. When several plants share the same soil, they contribute different types of organic matter through fallen leaves and root activity. This supports beneficial microorganisms living in the soil. Over time, even a small container can develop into a miniature ecosystem. Plants grow in a more stable environment, and gardeners may harvest several types of crops from a single pot. These ideas demonstrate that gardening does not require large spaces or complicated tools. The most important step is understanding how plants interact with each other. When a garden is designed as an ecosystem, each plant contributes something valuable. Some plants improve soil fertility. Some protect the soil. Others attract helpful insects. As these relationships develop, the garden gradually becomes more balanced. Plants grow stronger, and the soil becomes richer with time. Gardening then becomes more than simply producing food. It becomes a way of observing nature and learning how natural systems maintain balance and productivity.